Hello and welcome to There Ain't No Cure for the Summertime Blues Other Than KACE UEM. Today's webinar is sponsored by Quest and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I am excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, which is going to include a deck plus a lot of great demos, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A and we will provide further technical assistance. Now, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a link to get started with Quest and a PNG file that shows the whole KACE Unified Endpoint Management portfolio. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenter, and to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today, Mr. David Matar, Sales Engineer from Quest. David, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, so David, I'm going to take a back seat here and turn things over to you. Really looking forward to this presentation.
All right, thanks, Scott. Well, start to kind of chat a little bit about KACE and what we can do to help you guys in your, day-to-day, in particular in an educational environment. A lot of this is going to apply really to any industry, but we're going to obviously, take it down that road of how we can help your team in your educational environments. So based on that, I'm going to kind of advance a little through some of these slides, and we'll jump around into some demos and some live visualizations of what's going on. I don't like boring people with slide decks, but do like to just have it jumpstart some conversations. So look, we all know what's happening, right, with the world of IT. It's all changing. It's obviously been caused to be changed by some external events and things, but nevertheless, we've all got to keep up with that. We've got tons of different devices, Internet of Things. We've got people everywhere working potentially, and we're trying to manage all of that. We've got budgets that are shrinking, as we all know from our day-to-day. Then on top of that, we've got to be compliant and up to spec with our security and making sure we have no issues of intrusions and things that are causing potential, red flags in all of these devices that we do have to manage. So that really does lead, you guys to having a lot to deal with from your day-to-day. And so, again, looking at it kind of from an educational point of view, we know that you guys have a lot to do through the course of a school year, or, some sort of period of time where you've got these fires you're putting out, right? You got to keep up with the day-to-day. You got to put these fires out. You've got to do incident response. You've got to recover from those. Then you got to review those and see, okay, what can we do? Then maybe that break hits. Okay, time to regroup. And that's where KACE is going to be able to help you guys really being more, instead of reactive to those events, trying to get ahead of them and helping with now the day-to-day as that break tends to end. And that's what KACE is going to provide, right? We're going to give you a lot of different ways to do that management, a lot of different platforms to do that from, whether you guys are still running on-premise virtual servers, or if we're transitioning to cloud-based management. How do we get these devices enrolled? We can cover everything with the flexibility that KACE has, and that'll be hopefully what you guys see from some of this. And so just kind of a little bit of a view from the top, right, of what does the KACE endpoint management portfolio do? And again, referencing that image file that's in your handouts there, you guys could certainly pull that up if you'd like. But essentially, the endpoint management portfolio of KACE is going to give you guys the capability to handle all your day-to-day, needs for your endpoints and your users. We're going to be able to do discovery and vulnerability scanning, inventory and asset management, which is kind of a big, bread and butter piece, obviously, of that. We can go mobile if we're going to mobile devices and we need to cover, iPads and tablets and Chromebooks and all those sort of things. The security end of it, we'll be able to cover all the patching and Windows updates and third-party patching that you guys need to do. Let's get that new piece of software out there for the start of the school year. KACE will be able to help with that. Then at the end of the day, other pieces that add on to that are going to be things like full system imaging, right? If we actually just need to go ahead and re-image a device, we'll be able to get you covered there. And then there are some finer granular pieces of the product line that we may not have time to go fully into, but those are going to be more user experience management, things like group policy management, USB port security lockdowns, things along those lines does come into play with what KACE can also do. So, view from the top there, right? That's what everything is going to kind of cover as we're going to run through what KACE can do to help you guys out. And the first place we're going to start there is with asset management, because that's been a big issue for a lot of my customers is, man, where is all my stuff, right? And it kind of all went out the door maybe 2 years ago, and you had no choice. It was a fire sale. Hey, we just got to get people up and running. Here's a monitor. Here's a laptop. Here's a keyboard. Well, where is all that stuff? And now do we need to come up with a better process of how we can manage, how we can take care of those assets, not just of, hey, where is it, but also looking through the life cycle of that asset. So if we're talking about now looking at, well, how often do I need to replace these Chromebooks, or how often do I need to replace these laptops and in my lab, we can go through an actual life cycle management process there. So asset management is going to be the first thing we talk about. So I'm going to share my screen out, and you should hopefully see a KACE appliance in your view when you see that. And Scott, yell at me if we don't.
Yep, I don't see it yet, but
just getting it going here.
Okay, gotcha.
No worries. All righty. So it should be able to see your dashboard. Great. So, before we dive into the clear part over here that says asset management, just want to give a quick overview essentially of what this product is that you're looking at. So on its surface, this part of your KACE portfolio is our systems management appliance. It does just what it says. It manages devices. And so this is a freestanding appliance. It can be run in multiple different ways. We can provide you with VMware OVF templates, with Hyper-V templates. This is available in the Azure Marketplace, so you could actually just go spin it up there. We offer a hosting solution ourselves, so we can actually host this for you if you so desire. So a couple different ways to get this thing up and running in your environment. For the most part, it's a bring your own license scenario. You purchase your license from us, then you can decide what part of your infrastructure you'd like to run that in. Again, whether that's a VMware environment, Hyper-V, Nutanix, or even in Azure. Once that is running as an appliance, then you're presented with a typical management interface that you may be used to seeing in other endpoint management products, or really any sort of web UI management product these days, right? So this is the screen that you guys would live in during systems management appliance work. And the other half of this is related to how do we get those devices in here that we want to manage. You may notice I have a little connections area here. We'll get into that in a second. But at the other side of this is a connection that has to be made to a device that you're going to manage. A couple different ways to skin that cat, which we'll get into. But on the surface, we want to jump into asset management like I mentioned. Now, what's cool about KACE is that we don't really care what you define an asset is, right? That could be a laptop, could be a server, monitor, high dollar projector, could be the chair you're sitting on. Depends on what your organization defines as an asset that needs to be tracked. A lot of my customers use a dollar amount and say, hey, anything over this amount of money, we have to track as an asset through its life cycle for various reasons. Now, for a lot of, our IT folks, obviously assets you're going to be dealing with are kind of what we're going to call those, hard type of assets, laptops, desktops, that sort of thing. But those assets can be, as I mentioned, we'll call them soft assets, something like a piece of furniture, but it could also be something like a license. Licenses are very important assets to our customers. So if part of what you have to do is to track licensing for software, which we'll see here in a minute, that's also covered under our asset section. Now, one thing I want to mention about how we put this together from a cost perspective, because that's probably an important piece of everyone's puzzle. We don't really license you by static assets. And by that, I mean, you could literally come into our asset table and decide to manually add 10,000 assets if you wanted. You're never going to have a licensing issue with that. This is just essentially you adding manual information into a database, which is basically what this is. And you can do that all day, and we're never going to have an issue with any sort of licensing. There are some licensing components to the devices you're going to manage, but in terms of just if I wanted to come in and add 1,000 laptops in here just to know where they are and who owns them, that's never going to cost you anything extra in KACE. But now let's talk about some of those other types of assets we need to look at that we might want to try to do some management with, something like a network device or a printer, perhaps. We can have a bunch of different asset types that we create. And again, there's no limit on these. You can create as many different asset types as you guys may need to, depending on what you guys are trying to track. So if one thing we need to track are printers, we can create this asset type for a printer and then begin to populate what do we need to track on that printer, right? For something like a school, maybe we need to know the room number it's in. Maybe we need to know the floor it's on. If we get a service ticket for this printer, it'd be awesome to come in and know exactly where it's at, what room it's at, what lab is it in. So creating these asset types begins to build out your asset database on how you now want to track whatever it is that you guys have to track. So printer, again, as an example with a printer, some printers, well, most printers now, right, typically have some sort of network heartbeat for the most part. And if it has a network heartbeat, the KACE appliance can actually go scan your network, and it can pull back that information from a printer. Typically, it's an SNMP pull here, as we're seeing. And we start to get information back from this printer across the network, right? Here's what it is. This is an older Dell multifunction I've got. So it's pulling that information back. I've assigned it to someone. I can tell you where it's at. And we can come start to get some basic information out of it if the vendor is sending that information through their SNMP configuration. Some do, some don't. It does depend. Most of the major ones, Dell, HP, they will send some configuration back. And what you can get back from that information, again, for something like a printer, would be page counts, toner levels, some basic information as you're getting back through there. So really cool process to scan your network, pull back stuff, and then get it added into your assets and your inventory, right? So you're able to start to track those. Now, what about something like a laptop, right? Well, we want to obviously track that probably as an asset as well. And what's nice about that is we can really kill two birds with one stone when it comes down to something like a laptop with an operating system. What we would do in that situation is provision that device and have it now become managed by this appliance. And you can see some of these devices here have a little connection icon. So these are laptops. You can see their operating systems. These have been provisioned to this appliance through a small agent. And then once that agent connects, creates your asset record for that as well. So not only do you have it in your inventory, now you've got an asset record for it where we can now come in and, again, create all our specific things we need for this asset, right? What's its status, who's it's assigned to, location. You can add any number of custom fields into this if you need to. We can also link it to our barcode service tag, typically for a device. One thing I'll mention a little bit here down the road is we do have a mobile app with a barcode scanner. So the theory would be you could scan the service tag on an asset, pull up all the information within our mobile app for that asset, which would include service desk tickets. We have a built-in service desk. Again, we'll touch on this a little more in depth as we get further down. But you can also now associate all your service desk tickets with your assets. Hey, I've had 50 tickets for Bob's laptop. It is time to just dump that sucker and get him a new one, right? You've got all this data now in place to prove that. It's one thing to say that to a CTO. It's another thing to be able to show them a report that says, no, this is the amount of man hours we've been putting into these problems, into these assets. We need to rectify that, most likely with a replacement. So the biggest takeaway from assets, guys, is anything and everything that you need to track can be added into your asset management database here within KACE. It can all be reported on. You're looking at a dashboard right here of, really quick dashboard widgets for your assets, but this can all be customized for what you guys need to see. There's an entire reporting engine that, again, we'll touch on a little more later, that has an entire section for assets. And you can now report on all of these different pieces of hardware and inventory and assets that you have added into the system. So it's one thing to get them in there. It's another thing to be able to have the data to back up, what am I doing with those assets, right? So a couple things I want to call out about, inventory and assets as well. Devices with an operating system, we support, all your Windows operating systems going back to 10. I don't believe we support anything prior to 10 anymore. So 10 and 11 now are fully supported. Your server operating systems are fully supported going back to server 2010 on that one. We also support Linux and Mac OS as well as Chromebooks. I do want to call one thing out about Chromebooks because I think a lot of our educational customers do utilize Chromebooks. Part of that network scan that I mentioned earlier is the ability to go scan against your Google account and your tenant and pull back all that information. So these scans are pretty simple to set up. So for something like Chromebooks, we would set up an external scan. And then you would just have to set up a couple things. This is set up on the developer side of your Google tenant. You actually have to go in there and set up the available APIs where you can connect into them and pull the information back. It creates your client IDs and secret codes as well as an approval token. So that all kind of goes back and forth between the systems. Once that occurs, then any Chromebook or Google OS device will now be brought into your inventory for asset management as well. So that's a pretty big feature for our educational customers who are using Chromebooks. And you can see the other integration that we have built in terms of what you can discover depending on what you guys are working with. We can also pull in Workspace ONE. We have integration with our own mobile device management, which I'll show you guys later on. That's a big thing for our customers there is the Chromebook side of it. So I just wanted to call that out. And then most all other operating systems that we can install that agent on, we can pull in. It looks like my Ubuntu system may have gone offline, but you can see we've got one of those there. There's a server OS here. And so those are all very easy, low-hanging fruit. Install a small agent through group policy, perhaps. These devices now automatically connect back in, and your asset management now begins on those devices. I'm just going to take a quick look through the questions, see if there's any questions about the asset management section of the appliance. Doesn't look like it. So let's talk about now we've identified our assets. We know what we need to manage. We've got devices in inventory we've got to manage. Those are Windows devices, maybe they're Mac OS devices, whatever they may be. Well, now we got to keep those things secure and keep them compliant and make sure that they are not going to be red flags for intrusion, having issues with every other device on our network and just obviously causing compliance issues. So that's where our security side comes in here. And basically, we have a pretty simple process on how to take care of the security for those endpoints and those assets that you're going to manage. And this Helix here is just a quick little run through of essentially what our process is. And it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to jump back over to the appliance and actually go through how we handle security and in particular patching, right? That's really the major thing that we're going to focus on is patching and other Windows security features that we can handle. So again, we have a whole section here for security, another dashboard for just quick information. Some of these are really good. Critical patch compliance right off the bat. Not very compliant on my lab here, right? We can see I've got some issues there. Only 85% on actually completion of some of those patching processes. So, not really good there. But this is all really good information that if you just need to see after a patch Tuesday real quick what's happened, this is going to tell you really a lot of information right off the bat. This can all be customized, by the way. Different options here that you can add to that screen. And it's all user specific. So if one user has to see different things than others, they would all see whatever they need to in terms of these quick widgets on the dashboard here. So, the first part about how we handle patching in terms of security is going to be subscribing. What do we need to patch? What's important for us to patch? What operating systems are we going to patch? Are we going to patch software? Which KACE can handle. As you can see here, software publishers we could select from that we want to do their patches. So that's always step one. What am I patching? What am I worried about? What do I have to deal with in terms of my operating systems and if it's third-party publishers? Once those decisions are made, and I'm not going to go through all of these different options here, but you can see once those decisions are made, we've now set up our patch subscription, which is essentially us telling this KACE appliance, hey, here are the patches I'm concerned about. These are the ones I need you to go scan against and then in conjunction patch if we see issues. So we handle our own patch repository. We get the patches from the vendors, from Microsoft, from whoever we're doing. We take care of them in our own patch environment. We vet them, we test them, and then we handle the release out to your KACE appliance. Some other companies that do patching, they rely on third-party companies to do that for them, where they pull in the patches after that particular company has gone through the vetting process. That typically works fine. Where we have an advantage, though, is that we can typically get them out a little faster and still go through the same, vetting process to make sure that they're not problematic. It also gives us a little more flexibility in terms of zero-day patches, in terms of getting something out like for a log4j that had to get out pretty quick. We actually had a patch out for that faster than most other vendors. So that is an advantage of ours in terms of patching, is that we maintain the entire catalog. And once you subscribe to those patches, they're coming directly from us as we've gotten them from, the vendors that we need. So we're going to subscribe to what we need to do, right? That's typically step one. Well, now that we've done that, okay, well, what are we going to actually patch now? And we do that based on schedules. And schedules can be literally scheduled, and you can run those at certain intervals. These can also be run on demand as needed. If there is like a zero-day patch that needs to go out, you may need to create a specific schedule to get that out the door, right? But at the end of the day, we're creating a schedule to say, okay, here are the patches I've told you to scan against, and now here are the devices and the specifics on how I want that done. And it's, again, a pretty straightforward form, so to speak, to fill out. So, these could be literally named anything you need. We could call this, high school, just give it a number for now. Got a couple options on what we're going to do. We're going to detect, or we're going to deploy, or we're going to do both. How are we going to handle that? And those are pretty literally what they mean. A detect is, hey, go detect against that subscription I set up and tell me what's good, what's bad, what am I missing? And once I know that, then I need to deploy. So you could split those up into detect and deploy, two different schedules. Our best practice is typically a detect and deploy at once. So you could go ahead and set that up though for each specific environment. If you have, test groups you need to go through, if you want to just do a detect and then actually look through the results and decide what to do manually, a lot of different ways, to skin this cat. Again, it really does depend on everyone's own environment and what your protocols are for things like patching. What are we deploying? All patches. Well, we could also do a label. A label is Case's way of just putting things in a bucket. Hey, group all this stuff together. We're going to call it a label. You could call it any number of things, but it's just a grouping of something logical. And in this case, it could be a group of devices. So we could create a label or a bucket of, hey, here are all of my IT department's devices because they're going to get the first round of patches. That way, if stuff blows up, it's just on my IT guys, right? So that might be a simple patch to create for devices. You could also do that for specific patches. I just want to send out patches that meet this criteria to these specific devices. So labels are just our way of dumping all these things together. So you could set up that label to send it to certain devices. We could do to specific devices, right? And this is where you could just drop it down and select what you need there. Could do it right to operating systems. I just want to hit all my Windows 10 devices, one shot, right? Let me just get all those into my criteria. You give the end user some options, right? You can have it prompt them. You can give them some reboot options. You can have it be done when no one's logged in. You can let them snooze it a few times. All different options to give the end user. At the end of the day, you could give them no option and just say, hey, look, this has got a patch. It's happening at this time of day, whether you like it or not. Not usually the best approach for your end users, but could happen if you've got a very critical patch that has to go out. And again, you could put that on the schedule like we talked about. That detect and deploy runs after, Patch Tuesday, right? Every week or every other week, whatever your schedule may be there. So once a schedule is decided, then that's where those detect and deploys or staging or whatever it may be actually run. And if it's on a schedule, it will literally run, when you have set that schedule up. I'm going to go ahead and just hit run now on this one just to show you what would happen essentially. But that's going to go ahead and run, and it's going to go do a detection against these devices. And it's going to detect against that subscription I set up. And if there are things that it needs to deploy, let's see, was that a detect and deploy? Then it will deploy them. And you can see right here, it is executing against 3 devices and detecting to see what it needs. And then if it has stuff that it has had to deploy, those will go into succession there. And then you can hammer into those and actually see, hey, what did it deploy? There's much easier ways to get that data through the reporting section. But, at the end of the day, remember, this is just one big database that we're populating after things happen. So that data can usually be accessed a few different ways. Usually through a hammer down here when you see a little blue icon, or again, through the entire reporting engine over here, which for patching, again, there are quite a bit of reports built in from a security perspective. That's not the best ones. There we go, patching. So these are all built-in reports that we give you guys for patch data. Most of them are pretty specific to what you may need in terms of whether patches have deployed, what has failed, what's compliant, what needs to be rebooted. For instance, that one can be run and you can see very easily, okay, I need to reboot these devices, potentially for a patch that needs to have a reboot happen. So those are all built in, right? And at the end of the day, there's 22 built in. If you can't get what you need from the built-in ones, we have a report wizard that you can go through and actually build out the specific reports you need. And this is all SQL-based reporting, guys. So if you have a SQL person or if you are knowledgeable of SQL, and you have our database infrastructure in front of you, which we can get, and you can see, then you can actually just literally write out the SQL code for whatever report you may need. That's beyond me. I usually use the wizard, gets me most of the way there. We have SQL engineers who all they do is write this SQL code. So it can be very specific depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But there are times you have to do a custom query potentially if you're trying to get a complex report. And this is where we allow you to do it. While I'm talking to reporting, one thing I will note here is we also allow this database to be accessed externally. So you could do any sort of external reporting utility such as Power BI or Crystal reports, anything like that can tap right into this database. And then at that point, really the sky's the limit in terms of reporting. If it's a data piece that's been, entered into the database, again, then it can be reported on one way or another. So hopping back real quick to the security section here, guys, we kind of went through this process of, okay, we're going to subscribe to what we need. We're going to put it in a schedule. We're going to tell it what devices to go to. We're going to tell it, are we going to just detect? Or are we going to detect and deploy? And then after all of that, we can report on it and see, okay, what has happened and what do I need to remediate perhaps? And that's on its level, the very basics of how we can patch. And that's going to be the same system for whether that's a Windows patch or a Adobe patch or a Microsoft Office patch or whatever that may be. But one other area we can also cover in our quote unquote patching is Windows feature updates. And this is a pretty new feature set to us that we've had in here not too long, but it's a pretty powerful utility. So this is going to allow you guys, again, through the same process of a subscription, what Windows feature updates do I need to subscribe to? And we can take you all the way. I think that's the latest Windows 11. There may be one more after that, but I'm not sure. We can take you all the way to the latest. And the same sort of thing, a subscription and a schedule that we set up, detection and deploys again. This is a detect and stage. Just one note about a stage. If a Windows update, and some of them are pretty big, you may want to stage that file first on the local device before you deploy it, if bandwidth over your network is a concern. But the same sort of system of setting up your schedule. We're going to do this feature upgrade to, let's say we want to get to 11. Time to do it, right? We've been putting it off too long, so we just want to go from 10 to 11 on certain devices. And again, we can select all of our different options here. But at the end of the day, we're going to target a specific device that has 10 and we want to go to 11. And now instead of maybe doing an old school reimage or doing the update through, Windows console there in the OS, we can fire it off right here through KACE and actually get the Windows feature update to push itself out. A couple other notes on what we consider part of our security. Dell updates. At one point, KACE was owned by Dell. Some of you may have known that. If not, surprise, surprise. So we had a pretty good partnership with Dell, and to this day we still do. And part of that is actually being able to do Dell BIOS and firmware updates. Again, another very similar thing. We have them downloaded into a catalog. We set up a schedule. Very similar looking to all of our other schedules, right? And this is very specific, just for Dell systems. Not all hardware is in here, but most of them. And this is firmware and BIOS updates for just Dell. Something new we've added is Linux upgrades as well. So this is a very similar system. Again, more schedules. Now, what's interesting about the Linux system that we utilize is that we are kind of just piggybacking off of like the Red Hat Yum system. So your subscription to their patching is really what's going to dictate what you're going to be able to detect and deploy against any Linux operating systems. And as far as that goes, most of the major flavors, Red Hat, Ubuntu's, CentOS, will be able to get an agent installed on. And again, that's an agent managed device. As you may have noticed back in my inventory, it would come up here. So that was an Ubuntu device. So that could be patched right through our security profiles here. Oval and SCAP, I'll just briefly mention, those are kind of industry specific baselines for scanning. We can do the same sort of thing. It's on a schedule. We pull in that Oval criteria. I believe it's every 2 weeks once it's updated. And then we scan against that. The things to remember about these, there's no remediation there. It literally is just, here's what we have found. And then you're on your own kind of to fix those. And it really is just pure scanning. There's no remediation there. But using the other features that we have, you will most likely be able to knock some of that out. So, that's the security side of the fence, gang, in terms of what we're going to be able to handle from a security point of view. And it's pretty comprehensive. It's, all patching for all operating systems, essentially. And then as well as third-party applications, which is a pretty big list. If you didn't notice it when I was in there, the vendors that we do have support for is pretty large. And it's really easy to get a vendor added in there. If you are utilizing a vendor and we're not in there, typically we can, just with a support ticket that's open, say, hey, I need to get patches for this vendor, and we will typically get that added in if it's not too much of a problem with the actual vendor itself. Oh, looks like I have a little issue there. So one thing now I want to kind of move on to, we've talked a little bit about how to manage all those devices in inventory and in assets and how to patch those devices. And that's all well and good if we are now going to be kind of handling everything, in one location, but that's not really the case anymore, right? And so what I want to talk about now is how can we help you guys with taking care of your mobile devices? Because they may be one and the same. They could certainly be a device that's on premise for a good amount of time, but then it could also be a device that goes home. Could be a mobile tablet that has to be managed for certain classes. Could be a number of things, right? But either way, we can help with that in our KACE Cloud side of our UEM product line. And what KACE Cloud essentially is a mobile device management cloud-based solution where you'll be able to do all the different things you want to do in a mobile device management system. You want to enroll devices. We want to do autopilot, perhaps, where we drop ship a laptop to one of our end users and they just have to boot it up and get it on their Wi-Fi, and we've programmed it to do the rest. The devices, again, that we can manage from a mobile device point of view, pretty much anything under the sun, essentially, Windows devices, Mac OS, Android, iOS devices. Devices, obviously, you can do different things with them depending on what they are, but pretty much any sort of mobile device, or at this point now, Windows devices, we can manage through this process. And one thing I want to call out that we have just added into this is the ability now to do patching through this cloud-based system. So if it is totally a mobile game for you guys now and everyone is everywhere, to be managed, if we have to do it purely cloud-based, then we have the solution to handle that. You also get really a lot of other cool stuff with the mobile device management side of what we can do, because we can handle pushing out whatever apps we need to these devices, any sort of policies that we need to push out, passcodes can be wiped, factory resets can be done, geofencing can occur so we know where these devices are if they're starting to walk away. So this can all be done under our, cloud umbrella in terms of, all right, well, what can we do now if we have to get out from the building, so to speak. So we have you covered there as well, guys. Just going to take a quick scan through the questions. Don't see any. Don't be shy if you guys need to know something. So a lot of this is good, right? We can manage devices, we can secure them, we know where our things are, we can report on them. But there's a whole other side, I think, of what you guys have to deal with, and that is we got end users who are constantly asking for stuff, and we need to be able to not only support that, but support it effectively and save ourselves headaches from day to day of doing nothing but reinstalling Firefox for someone. And so what our product line also has under its hood that is also free, it's not any extra licensing, it's a fully functional service desk. And that service desk can be configured really to do any number of things, right? That service desk can certainly just be a basic, hey, I'm going to go through and do incident management tickets, just basic, hey, this is broken, help me, come fix it. It can be set up to do CMDB type of management. It can be set up to do HR onboarding and offboarding management if need be. So that is a really powerful utility that, can help you guys with the day-to-day of managing not just the devices, but now managing your end users, expectations of how do I keep these devices, updated with software they need, with patches they need. All of that can be done through a service desk. And so the service desk, I'm going to share my screen out real quick. So the service desk is essentially a blank slate out of the box, which is good and bad, right? Because, you're definitely able to customize it however you need to. But at the same time, you do have to do some setup and configuration. Our service desk is essentially queues, service desk queues. Now, that can be any number of way you guys want to separate things. That can be incidents, that could be by teams, that could be however you need to define it. There's no limit to the amount of queues that you can have within the system. And you can see here, I've got a bunch of different ones in there, right? And they can be many, many different things, including incidents and requests. It can be change management, where you actually link approvals to, these tickets and say, hey, I need a layer of approvals before I can purchase this new piece of equipment, or before I can bring this server down because it's not in the maintenance window. You can actually create those queues and those tickets to do any number of those things. But on its basic level, right, you're talking about most likely incidents. And incidents, can be any number of things depending on what you need them to be. But for the most part, as we think of it in IT, hey, my printer is down. We'll just use that as a basic one. Now, this form can be fully customized. You can come in here and set this up exactly how you guys need to, any number of ways, and then just work it like you would any sort of other IT ticket that you guys might be used to working. And then again, what's cool about this is that there is a full dashboard with reports built in, so you can go through and find out very basic things. Am I meeting my SLAs? What devices are giving me the most problems? What technician is doing the most, closures of tickets? What is my average closure time? All of these things are built in to the reports that we give you already built in for the service desk. So really good service desk, not any extra charge. We don't license it by technician or anything like that. It is just really there to be utilized if need be. If you purchase the KACE suite, it's there, right? You don't have to use it, but it is there to be used if you need to. And we kind of mentioned this earlier, kind of the other side of the spectrum of, okay, well, we can manage everything, we can track everything, we can secure everything, I can track my tickets, but this thing's just too broken. Time to start over. Well, one of the other utilities and full features of the KACE product line is a full imaging solution. And that is literally just what it sounds like. You can now go in, well, I shouldn't say now, but you can go in and utilize a feature of, I want to fully image a device. And that can be as custom as, I want to format the hard drive, I want to wipe it, and I want to start over, and I want to put on a brand new operating system because, this one's just completely worn out, right? So that can be done from our systems deployment appliance, which is another side of, the KACE suite. So something to keep in mind, guys, as you're thinking about how all of this goes together, you have different, appliances and different management consoles to do all these different things. So you've been seeing, for the most part, the systems management appliance console, and you saw briefly the cloud management console. And I'm going to show you here. This is our deployment management console. Minus not being in dark mode, it looks pretty much the same as all the other consoles that you have looked at. With one really major difference is the deployment appliance does one thing, and it does one thing only, but it does it really well. And that is deploying images. A couple I have in here, Windows 10 image, a Server 2019 image. You can load as much source media, as many images, as many custom drivers, as many boot environments as you need into this. Storage space is really your limitation. And then you can begin the process of deploying images. Now, for you guys in education, that could be a yearly thing where we're actually going to go through and we're going to re-image a bunch of systems, right? And if you can see this video playing, this is an actual KACE customer. This is a lab that they've got set up. This is a summertime project. I want to say it was about 400 to 500 laptops they were imaging. That's a pain, but they were using the KACE Systems deployment appliance, and they were using our feature set in there for Pixie booting. So in a contained lab environment, they are able to throw, I think they were doing about 24 at a time into a 24 port switch and Pixie booting them and multicasting their image down to these laptops. Without KACE to do this, they would have had to do it the old fashioned way, or, I think they were honestly using Ghost before. So they definitely came a long way there. So this is the type of thing that KACE imaging is going to be able to help with. If it is just a large, hey, I need to send out a nice fresh image to 50, 100, 200 laptops, whatever that may be, then that's where the deployment appliance is actually going to be able to come into play. And where it all comes in, together there, guys, is kind of the way the puzzle comes together is you can use all of this in conjunction. So here's your, pie in the sky where I'd love everyone to be with KACE UEM. I want you guys to be able to take a laptop and do some of the basic imaging on it with our SDA in terms of getting your partitions right, creating the restore that's needed, embedding the autopilot information. So you heard that, maybe you see where I'm going here. And then I want you to be able to drop ship that laptop to whoever you need to send it to, send it home with someone at the end of the day, whatever that may be, with the simple instruction of get it on your Wi-Fi, hit the power button, then get it on your Wi-Fi, follow the instructions from there. And you're going to go through this process of, okay, we used our deployment appliance to do the basic. Now they're going to autopilot and roll into my KACE cloud device management system. And then at that point, we can actually direct them over to the management appliance for all the finer points, right? The patches that need to get deployed, some of the custom software we need to deploy, which I didn't even touch on, guys, which is probably a very big thing for you. And I want to actually talk about that real quick, not to do a tangent, but that is a pretty important thing I think I want to mention is deploying software. So part of this is deploying, we call it a managed install. I was talking to one of my educational customers the other day, and this was a community college, and they were having to implement a new program. It was a lockdown browser. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was a lockdown browser that they needed all of their systems to have. That way, anyone taking tests remotely had a secure browser that locked them into that screen. They couldn't mouse out of it or tab out of it to go cheat. They utilized KACE to push that piece of software out to a couple hundred laptops that they had out in the field for remote learning. So that's kind of where it can all start to tie together, right? We can get everything managed. We can get it into the system. We can image it from scratch. We can manage it mobily. And then we can take care of some of these finer points like knocking out the software that we need to get into it, getting it patched and getting it up to speed and getting everything compliant for our environment. And really, guys, at the end of the day, that is what the KACE product line is all about. We want to help you solve your problems, hopefully in a simpler method than you are now, show you what you can do down the road. Because quite honestly, I think the industry is heading more towards the cloud management side of it than I think a lot of us may have expected and sooner than we thought. But being able to handle that side of the fence and being able to patch your devices in a cloud environment, or being able to still do an old school image if we need to, and then work a service ticket for it, all under one hood, is really where the Quest and the KACE portfolio lands you. And I think there's a lot of good features in there, whether you decide that the entire portfolio fits what your needs are or maybe different pieces. Either way, we can get the right piece of the puzzle to help you guys as you continue down this road with again, your educational customers, or really any environment that you may find yourself in where you've got to do some sort of mass management of a lot of devices at once. That's really where KACE is going to come into play for you guys. I'm just going to scroll through the questions real quick. Don't see any.
Oh, David, there's a bunch. You might need to.
Oh, maybe I'm not looking at the right priority here. Let's see.
Yeah, try newest. Select by newest there. That might help. Then you'll see the most recent.
There we go. Okay, cool. All right, well, I'm going to scroll through some of these then, and we will answer a couple here. How does KACE handle imaging, or is that a different product? It is a KACE product. It's the systems deployment appliance. So it is a KACE product, but a different interface. Can you create a custom image from a known good install? Yeah, so you can actually crack open an image file if we need to, and go through there. Can we create a custom Windows 10 image that has pre-installed the software we need installed? Yeah, you could do an old school thick image like that where you install the software you need and then capture that image. If you're using in conjunction with the other appliance, you can also have that handle the software, after the fact. So a couple of different ways to skin that cat. Let's see. Can service requests use an email address to create a new ticket? Yeah. Sorry if I didn't mention that. A couple of ways tickets can get created. You can email an address into a queue. There is a user portal that can have a ticket created in. The mobile app can have tickets created. So we can definitely cover that one. Track and report on warranty AppleCare expiration. Yes, through the KACE Cloud interface, we can pull in that. You have to obviously have that set up on the Apple backend. But yes, we can pull in that sort of information through our KACE Cloud interface. I think that may have got him. Let's see. Oh, nope.
Yeah, actually, so if you go to the upper right, there's you can see that you're on screen 1 of 4. So there's more screens there.
Cool. Group policy question. Can you push group policy to remote users? That can actually be done through a product I didn't mention, guys, which is called Desktop Authority. You'll see that on that image that's in the resources there. Desktop Authority can push group policy out to your end users. So yes, that's just, again, part of a little different interface module than what we looked at. Let's see, Microsoft feature update installation. Yeah, we covered that. We can handle that. Here's a good question. If the appliance is installed on the Office network and you have remote users VPNing in, how do they get the patch updates? Really good question. So the KACE appliance can actually be opened up to the outside world. You can put an SSL cert on it, and then at that point, it's just traffic across port 443. So you have a publicly facing IP address. When you install that agent that I mentioned on one of those remote devices, you tell that agent, where am I connecting? So you give it the public address of your KACE appliance, and then it will connect. The agent will connect without the VPN being needed. Now, if that's not an option, you still have to do it through VPN. Then my suggestion there would be to set up a schedule around when that VPN is active for certain users, and then they'll be able to connect that way. But ideally, opening up the box is the best way to do that, or utilizing our hosting service where we can host that for you guys in an internet environment, so then they could all definitely reach it at that point. Good question about security between the agent and back to the appliance. One thing that we utilize is an agent token. So unless you have given that agent the specific token that you have set up, it will never be able to connect. So if I was trying to be malicious and I knew one of my customers' appliance addresses, which I know a bunch, if I wanted to try to be malicious and have an agent connect to it, it wouldn't be able to do anything. It might connect, but with the token applied, it's going to go into what we call quarantine. And then the administrator can, at that point, kick it out of quarantine and realize it's some sort of malicious device. So you're never going to get an unauthorized connection by utilizing the built-in security protocols to the agent, tokenization being the main one. Let's see. Question about discovery, notifications when a new device is discovered on the network. If there's a rogue device found, yes, you can set up notifications. When those discovery schedules are run, most of the time I set up a report with that. Those reports can be emailed on a schedule. So you can have that report email you as soon as that discovery is done, and then you'll know exactly what's going on there. Track assets within an asset. Yeah, so we can hammer down into an asset. So for instance, if your asset is a server rack, then each potential slot within that rack could also be part of that asset. So you can hammer it down as granular as you need to, depending on what that primary asset is that you want it to be. Let's see. Ability to create custom field for assets. Yep, you can create as many custom fields as you want. And here's a good kind of general question. How can the solution help with increasing efficiency and reduce the risk of security incidents by ensuring that all endpoints are up to date and compliant with organizational policies? So really, guys, that would be, making sure that these devices are compliant with Windows patches and up to date with all the security patches that we can push to them from the application point of view, as well as from the Windows point of view, making sure the software is up to date. Part of what I did not show you is also the ability to see all the software that is installed. So for instance, a flag or a notification could be set up to say, tell me when BitTorrent has been installed. Right? And then you can easily go remove and remediate anything you need there. Let's see. Good question about these features and if they are all part of a base product or add-ons. So each appliance is its own product, right? So the systems management appliance, that's where you're doing patching and everything. That's its own product that can be purchased by itself. The deployment appliance, where you do all your imaging, that is its own product and can be purchased by itself. The cloud environment, where you would do mobile device management, that is a subscription, so you could subscribe to that individually on its own. Where we can combine them is with our systems management appliance and with our mobile device management interface. That becomes a co-managed system, so those are kind of components that add on there. But basically, all of it is going to be individual appliances, with the separate features across them, like we went through. Does KACE have an API that can be leveraged? Yes, we do have an open API for a couple of different things: assets, inventory, basic information that can flow in and out of that API. So there's an entire API call guide available for the systems management appliance. So that is definitely in there. Let's see.
David, I think you made it to the end of the list.
Yeah, I think so. I think I rolled through them. I'm just trying to make sure here. I'm back at the newest.
That was awesome.
Yeah, no worries. I think we got them.
Yeah, no, great demos, great presentation, and thanks for answering so many questions. I think that was one of the most efficient Q&A sessions we've ever had, and if the gauge of a good session is how many questions you inspired, this one was off the chart. So well done.
Scott, let me answer this one last one, because this is maybe an important
absolutely.
one. How does one get started with KACE Quest? Hey, that's a great question, right? So we can get you handled a couple different ways. If you want to just reach out to me directly, I can take it from there. But at the end of the day, if you go onto the website that's in your, in your handouts there, there'll be an area where you can request information, and that basically puts you in touch with your regional sales rep. Your regional sales rep will reach out and just start chatting with you. And as far as you guys decide to go from there, the next steps may be if you guys wanted to do a trial. Some of our customers like to do a more in-depth demo at that point, where you may get to listen to me again for an hour. But just essentially reach out to us and we'll get you in touch with your regional sales rep, and we'll kind of take it from there. All else fails, feel free to reach out to me directly. I think my contact info is right there on the last slide, and we'll make sure we get you taken care of.
Yep, David's listed right there at david.matar@quest.com. So yeah, super. Well, David, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for all your time today and for being so generous with the questions portion as well. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. And before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that $250 Amazon gift card today is Quincy Moreland from Illinois. So congratulations, Quincy. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank David and Quest for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for all of your great questions today. That concludes this event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.